to Let's Talk. Let's Talk aims to create national conversation on the issues of the day. Your host this evening, senior newsman Gary Moreno.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Let's Talk. Joining us on the set this evening is Mr. Marc Bean, JP MP.
Evening.
Otherwise known as Pilot, and he is, of course, the leader of the Progressive Labour Party, the opposition leader. Mr. Bean, thank you for joining us here on Let's Talk tonight, and let's do just that. Let's talk. You gave your response to the thrown from the speech in the House of Assembly last Friday, and there is a 15-page document that you outlined a number of proposals that you would like to see implemented, or that you would have implemented with the PLP in government. And you clearly stated that some may ask why we did not implement these ideas and bring forward these proposals while we were in government. You gave a response to that, but elaborate on that response. Why didn't we see the PLP introduce these ideas when they were in fact in government a couple months ago?
Good evening, Gary, and good evening to the listening public. For the edification of the public, I will ask you to continue the quote and the explanation that I gave.
To them I say, with new leadership comes a new direction, a new purpose, and a new way of doing things, and I'll end it there. But it still begs a question, why weren't these policies and these ideas brought to the table when the PLP was in government and in fact implemented?
Well, that's the nature of government. When you have leadership, the leader of the party or the government ultimately has a decision on the direction in which they want the party or the government to go. Now, if people ask why are we bringing these initiatives now instead of before, it's because I think the answer was December 17th, 2012, which made us humbly reflect on where we went wrong and the mistakes that we made and what we can do to improve the country going forward. We have unfinished business in the country, and the major issues is unemployment, education, and crime. And so you will see in the third speech reply ideas that if the One Bermuda Alliance are interested in not just saying they want to cooperate, but they are actually interested in cooperating for the better interests of this country, then they will just accept the ideas and let's discuss the proposals, and if they want to implement it for the betterment of the country, then so be it.
Could be argued that that's just political parties say the right things at the right time. No. You holding out much hope of that happening?
What, that the One Bermuda Alliance would take up the proposals?
Yes.
Well, to be honest, looking at the reaction today in today's Royal Gazette by Senator Nelton Brangman, the Minister of Education, to that proposal, he described it as unbelievable, and other words of that effect. And that shows me that they are not as willing to do what they say.
But that's par for the course in politics, isn't it? Why would the ruling party adopt an idea that's put forward by the opposition, despite what they may have said in the lead-up to a general election, given that we, in fact, operate under the Westminster system?
Because some things are beyond just being a political football, and they come under the concept of national interest. And okay. So everything that the One Bermuda Alliance has said in terms of cooperating and working together, we did our part to present proposals for them to take a serious look at. By presenting the proposal in terms of education, are reverting to the old system. That's not an indictment on the One Bermuda Alliance. They've only been the government for 2 months. Okay, now I have been on record, and the public, some of the public will remember that in 2008, I was in the Senate, and we were having a discussion on the plight of young black males. And so while I was giving my contribution, I graded my party's, my government's work on education, and I said that we failed. And subsequent to that, a apology was written in my name that came out into the public, but people know that my position on education has never wavered. I have remained consistent, and so now I am the leader of the Progressive Labour Party, and as part of that reflection, we have had discussions on education and other areas in which we think and we feel that could be effectual going forward. Now, if the One Bermuda Alliance is not interested, and it seems like they're not interested, because all they have done is articulate or advocated maintaining the status quo. Now, for the last 14 years, education, crime, and well, particularly education and crime, but even unemployment have been used as a political football. We did not use it as a political football. The One Bermuda Alliance used it as a political football. And it seems like from their response to our proposal that they are intent of continuing the political football of education.
But I spoke with a senior education official today, and that individual suggested that to do away with the middle schools, as you propose, and if I'm not mistaken, that's the proposal that you're referring to do away with the middle school system would cause serious disruption in the system, and that perhaps is not the way to go at this point in time. And even if that were in fact to be carried out, we won't see any benefits until 10, 11 years down the road.
What is the purpose of education? I mean, is it for short-term benefits or long-term benefits? And so when
I think the argument being that it could be too disruptive, and what we need to look at, or what should be looked at, is the front end, and look at ensuring that preschool is compulsory and so on.
When you look at education, you have to look at it from preschool, which is the base, to your apex, which is a university or college. Now, in terms of the idea that it would be too disruptive, my position and the PLP's position is that the most disruptive action that occurred in education is when we introduced the middle school. And that came at a cost, financial cost.
PLP was in power for 14 years and had the opportunity to revoke that.
We certainly did. We certainly did. And instead, we chose to continue building on the middle school concept. But we have to ask ourselves, are we getting the necessary results? And you have to remember that as legislators, the majority of us were educated in a system that's not the middle school system. So how is it that we can offer to our children something that we ourselves are not willing to accept? And so again, well, going forward, this is 2013. You can speak of the Progressive Labour Party not taking their steps over the last 14 years, but you can also see that as one of the reasons why we lost and were voted out of government on December 17th.
And you're holding to that?
Absolutely. You see, Gary, you have to understand that myself personally, both of my children were in the public education system. Unlike many members of parliament who have their children in private school, I actually have to look at it, and I experience it not just as a legislator, but also as a parent. And so in assessing it from that perspective, the responsibility, yes, can be put on the family unit and parents. Yes, responsibility can be put on teachers and administrators. But ultimately, there's three segments of the educational system. Parents, teachers, and administrators can only work within the framework that we as leaders set for them. And so I know that they are working diligently and they're doing their best. And yes, you have children who are successful within the current system, but that you will get exceptional students doing well regardless. But at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to see our children, what type of moral and academic foundation do we want to see our children have when they become adults? Now, people will say that, well, it's going to cost a lot of extra money and disruption, but what are the ramifications of maintaining the status quo as is?
I have to come back, Mr. Bean, to the fact that these situations existed under the PLP tenure in government, and nothing was done. Was there an epiphany after you lost the election?
Well, remember, I'm the leader of the Progressive Labour Party now. And so when I went to my caucus to discuss it, and yes, there was some apprehension into making such a bold statement, a statement that speaks contrary to the position that we had maintained for 14 years. But again, when you lose an election and a message is sent to you, the best thing you can do is be humble and reflect and ask yourself, learning from our experiences, is there an opportunity for us to change our ways?
Too little, too late?
No, it's not too late. Education is a lifelong experience. We have one generation who have now, and not all, but you can see the culture of the middle schools breeding gang violence and whatnot. But are we to continue to maintain the status quo so the children born today or the children entering preschool will go into the same system and the same environment so we could perpetuate the violence and the anti-social behavior in the country? No, I think not.
Now, the opposition members of parliament also have the ability to bring bills to the House, not
Yes,
so?
yes.
Is this something that you would perhaps look at down the road?
Well, it's certainly something that we would have been in a position to do if we had 17 seats in the House, if there is an opportunity to do so. And it will certainly put the One Bermuda Alliance to the test, because right now it seems as if they have very little interest in public education. And I say that because for years you had one of the senior members of parliament, the Honorable Dr. Grant Gibbons, who was the Shadow Minister of Education. I don't think he ever visited, and I stand to be corrected, I don't think he ever visited a public school. But yet when they become government, he's no longer, or he chooses not to become the Minister of Education, and he decides to become the Minister of Economic Development, which is basically where all the money is flowing. So what was the purpose of being the Shadow Minister of Education all this time, and then once you become government, you're supposed to be the expert in the One Bermuda Alliance, but you choose to go in another ministry and appoint Senator Nelton Brangman to the post. I don't think that's an indication of seriousness on the part of the One Bermuda Alliance to strengthen or fix the education system that they use as a political football for far too long.
And I want to make just a quick comment here that we have been trying to get the leader of the government, Mr. Craig Cannonier, Premier Craig Cannonier, to appear on Let's Talk, and our last invitation was declined again. He indicated that he had previous engagement. We were hoping to have him on tonight. Hopefully we can have him on, and there is an open invitation to you, Mr. Cannonier, if you are in fact interested in appearing on the show.
But that's not surprising.
I'm not going there with you, Mr. Bean.
I'm
not going there with you, Mr. Bean.
That's how it's been for the last year.
I want to segue to bounce off of something you mentioned a little while ago. If you had 17 seats in the House, you have two veterans in the persons of Mr. Randy Horton and Mr. Terry Lister. Mr. Lister now an independent, or declared himself an independent at the first sitting of the new parliament, and Mr. Horton is in fact now the speaker. It is rumored that these men took these positions because, well, in Mr. Horton's case, of you being the leader of the party. Mr. Lister, of course, he outlined his reasons on the floor of the House last Friday. Speculation that perhaps your leadership is more polarizing than unifying. How do you respond to that?
It's false. And anyone who promotes that speculation is merely trying to divide and conquer the Progressive Labour Party, or they want to be an instrument of divide and rule within the Progressive Labour Party. Now, because two senior members have chosen to, one, be an independent and two, become a speaker, does not speak to the fact that the Progressive Labour Party is getting stronger by the day. People wouldn't see it, but I can tell you that I'm very impressed with my parliamentary caucus. I'm very impressed with my new executive, very impressed with the Central Committee, and I'm very impressed and encouraged with the energy shown within the party to reach back to the populace via the branch, or the branch system. And so we're very much getting ourselves in order. And so when you have one or two senior members leaving, which isn't the first time an opposition party goes through these challenges, especially after a leadership position, it doesn't indicate that the party itself is in any form of weakness or my leadership is weak. It just indicates that those two gentlemen decided that they can no longer be factual within the construct of the party.
Now, Mr. Lister, or Mr. Horton, sorry, you indicated when it was announced that he was Speaker of the House of Assembly, a press release came out from the PLP indicating that he remains a member of the Progressive Labour Party. For how long?
I cannot say, because again, any decision made within the Progressive Labour Party is an internal party process, and so I will not speak publicly as to what is to happen.
Surely this is not a comfortable position for you to find yourself in as leader.
Well, when you become a leader, no one said that it's going to be all rosy. You have to expect and have the courage to deal with adversity. And again, this is not the first time a leader of the Progressive Labour Party has had adversity. And I'm confident in my ability of holding everything together, and not because of myself, but because of the membership. They are the ones that are showing the energy and the desire to re-strengthen and renew ourselves. And so that's what we're doing.
I want to continue on that theme when we come back from this break. Stay with us.
Let's Talk is a ZBM News 9 presentation. We continue in a moment.
And thanks for staying with us. Well, during the break, I was having a little chit-chat with Mr. Bean here, and we were talking about that situation with Mr. Horton. How is it that he remains a member of the Progressive Labour Party? That was what we were talking about before we went to the break. He's saying that the branch, going back to the branch system, is going to strengthen the party and the like. What are you hearing from the branches with regard to that situation?
The branches are not happy. The party is not happy. And the branch of Constituency 32, and now because of the move by MP listed, Constituency 33, will be meeting over the next few days and weeks to discuss the last few weeks and the events that have transpired over the last few weeks. But I think more importantly, to give focus to the future. The fact is that now that Speaker Horton is the Speaker, he sits as an independent. And so in terms of representation in the constituency, that's going to be basically null and void anyway. And likewise with MP Lister becoming an independent. So the focus for us is to identify capable candidates who can replace those two gentlemen and hit the ground early and ensure that the voters of those two constituencies, that the Progressive Labour Party is represented and they have any issues, that they have a representative who will look after their interests.
But not these two gentlemen?
No.
Any chances at all of an olive branch being offered to Mr. Lister to woo him back to the ranks, so to speak?
When you are a gentleman of considerable experience, both political and commercial, as MP Lister, there's very few olive branches one can offer to a person who has that type of experience. He made a decision and he clearly indicated in the House of Assembly that it was based on his conscience. So if it's based on his conscience, I have to respect that and allow him to be at peace with his conscience. But in terms of an olive branch, I don't think an olive branch is necessary. The door to the PLP neither has a lock or a handle. And so it's there, and when a person wants to participate, they are free to do so. If they don't want to participate, they are free to do so.
Some of the comments we've been hearing or reading on the blogs and the like are downright venomous. In one of those blogs I read where it was indicated that Mr. Lister dare not show his face at the Somerset Recreation Club again. Certainly not the kind of thing.
Club?
Somerset Cricket Club, I'm sorry. Certainly not the kind of thing you would encourage.
No, I wouldn't encourage it, but at the same time, we cannot take the voters of this country for granted. And it's not just these two gentlemen and this recent decisions, but you have seen over the years the same type of behavior across the political spectrum. Sometimes I think members of Parliament, because we occupy one of those 36 seats in Parliament, we think that we have some God-given right and ability to do what we feel and choose for our own interests, neglecting the interests of the people. We have to remember that the shareholders, the stakeholders of this country are the voters, and that's who you represent, and that's the bottom line. So when you go against their wishes, then naturally you can expect that type of feedback from people.
Can you state categorically that you don't support that kind of talk, that kind of behavior?
What, don't come up Somerset Cricket Club? Well, that's up to the members and supporters of Somerset Cricket Club. You have to understand that Somerset is very much, as a parish, very much supportive of the Progressive Labour Party. They are very loyal persons. And you also have to remember that both Speaker Horton and MP Lister have ties, family ties, and personal ties to Somerset Cricket Club. So if you hear that sentiment coming from the club, it's not emanating from the young people, it's emanating from their peers.
But isn't the role of the leader also to act as a conciliator?
A conciliator?
And try to calm rough waters?
Of course, but at the same time, when you go and knock on a person's door, you are building trust between yourself and that person. When they come to vote for you at the polling booth, you are building trust, or it's based on the trust that you have with that person. So you have to be answerable to people. Am I encouraging violence against these two gentlemen? Absolutely not. There's no chance in the world that I would do so. But are people free to express their feelings to the two gentlemen? Yes, the same way they're free to express their feelings to me or any other member of Parliament.
In this document, again, the response to the speech from the throne indicated that the Progressive Labour Party will pursue a balanced approach, eschewing the radicalism of far-left policies or the extremist policies of the right wing. Neither the nanny state nor a state where profits take precedence over people is desirable, and we shall pursue and promote policies that expand opportunity for all and renew our society's commitment to fairness and justice. It seemed to suggest a change of tune
Yes.
on the part of the PLP.
Yes.
Yet, in a statement over the weekend, you referred to the One Bermuda Alliance as
Demonic?
Demonic. Certainly not conciliatory language.
No, not really. But it's the language that I use to describe their behavior. And as everyone knows, I call it as I see it. Now, yes, some people might take offense to me using that term. But when one looks at their behavior, one looks at their formation. Now, remember, Gary, I was the candidate in the by-election in Warwick against the Bermuda Democratic Alliance and the United Bermuda Party.
Yes.
I saw both of them die and become one. And so many in the public did not see how that occurred. I was in Parliament when 1 week Kim Swan was the opposition leader and friends of all, when you had the BDA MPs isolated in the northeast corner. And then the next Friday, Kim walks in and is treated like absolute dirt. And yet the other 3 BDA members are now all hunky-dory, you know, and rubbing shoulders with their new counterparts. And so I'm watching it unfold. In fact, the Honorable Minister Sean Crockett in Parliament this last Friday referred to conversations that we had often within Parliament about me saying that, listen, you guys don't have a chance and you're not going to win. What he didn't explain is the reason that I kept saying it. And the reason why I said that is because the whole existence is built on deception, fraud, and lies. And I'm sure he understood it, but the OBA, their mantra seems to be the ends justify the means. And so, yes, I was proved wrong, and their slogans of change, whatever that means, really resonated with part of the voters in this country. But at the same time, man, you have to ask yourself, who is the author of deceit and fraud and lies? Is that behavior right, or is it based on righteousness? If it's not, then what is it based on? Is it okay for me to stand up here tonight and say the young men out there in our community are shooting their brothers and their cousins dead, are demonic? What's the best way to describe the spirit within a human being who will take another human being's life? It's demonic. It's a spiritual vice. It's an issue with one's mind and one's spirit. And so when I look at the One Bermuda Alliance, I look at their foundations, and I call it as I see it. It's not the first time I described the One Bermuda Alliance in that way. In fact, you can check the Hansard in Parliament. I have described the One Bermuda Alliance's behavior over the last year and a half or 2 years since their formation as Harry Potter politics. They're playing like they're political magicians. They're trying to fool the people. And so now we see the impact of that behavior. Since they've been in government, just about everything they had said pre-election, they have done a 180-degree turn on what they said. Now, integrity, right? Integrity means that you say what you mean and mean what you say, and then you do it. Honor and honesty is attached to it. How could you sit up in the House of Assembly and call and consider yourself to be honorable when everything you're doing is to ensure that you serve a very narrow interest group at the expense of Bermudians and their welfare, while using slogans and language which makes it appear as if the people of this country, the voters who put you into government, is their interest that you're checking for. That's not the case. And so in my address to my Founders Day audience, the Progressive Labour Party's 50th anniversary Founders Day, it was on the back of a most brilliant speech by Eugene Johnston, probably the most powerful speech that the party has received in some time. And I used it as an opportunity, my address, not only to speak to the One Bermuda Alliance, because quite frankly, they're not my major concern. My major concern was the Progressive Labour Party, which I made it clear that I will not be tolerating, and I'm speaking on behalf of the people of this country, I will not be tolerating snake in the grass behavior, disloyal behavior, or any behavior which uses you as an instrument to divide and rule. That is, whose benefit is that going to be, except for those who seek to have the Progressive Labour Party destroyed?
You've taken a lot of stick on the blogs again for that comment. Stand by it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Gary, listen, this is what I know. All right, I go 39 tomorrow. I'm not young.
Happy birthday in advance.
Thank you. And I'm not old. But becoming the leader of the Progressive Labour Party makes me a target. Okay? And that's just how it is. And so even if someone came and said, Mark Bean is the son of God, you will have half of the people in this country not liking anything I said. Just look at the reaction to my reply to the throne speech. If you look at it objectively, it was very positive. I expressed the desire to work along with the One Bermuda Alliance and even offered proposals to the One Bermuda Alliance that we feel would be of the best interest of this country, whether they implement it and take the credit for it or not. And so, I just have to be prepared to take the negative, and it's natural. I mean, this is politics. This is not kindergarten.
You're accused of practicing some deception as well, and I want you to clarify something for us.
Please.
On another program with my good friend Sherry Simmons, it is alleged that you stated that you support the abolition of term limits. Clarify that for us. Did you ever say that? Did you ever make that comment?
No, I have not made a public statement to that effect. What I did say is, if you're going to look at term limits, it has to be part of a comprehensive and holistic immigration reform. So you cannot put the cart before the horse. Obviously, term limits is an emotional issue in this country for various reasons. Obviously, work permits an emotional issue in this country for various reasons. So as advice to the One Bermuda Alliance, if they want to make a policy shift, then you need to do it without haste, because haste makes waste. And so if you're going to make a move in terms of term limits, show the people of this country that you're doing it with their best interests in mind and not just the interests of what could be considered their paymasters, which is international business or whoever else. And so that was my position, and that's the position of the Progressive Labour Party. You see the impact or the fallout over the last few weeks as a result of Minister Fay making that announcement. And it's just what I expected. Because when you are hasty and you don't take the time to communicate and consult with people on an issue as important as this, then you're going to create or draw a sand in the line, and you're going to create walls and barriers. And that's not the way to go about being an effective government. And so that was my position, and that's what I said.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to continue on that same note based on some information that I received earlier on today. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Let's Talk is a ZBM News 9 presentation. We continue in a moment.
Thanks for staying with us. I almost called you Minister. Mr. Bean, coming back to this question of the term limits, I've been made to understand by a very good source, and I'm not asking you to tell tales out of school, that the former minister that was responsible, or the individual that was formerly responsible for immigration issues, former Minister Patrice Miners, had a cabinet paper prepared supporting the abolition of term limits. Is there any truth to that?
I cannot recall if the care paper was prepared, and it being prepared does not necessarily mean that it was brought to cabinet. Now, I do know that we were very much focused on the job makers legislation, which looked to give incentives to C-suite executives, meaning those executives, chief financial officer, chief underwriting officer, chief executive officer, and whatnot. But in terms of us having or approved a paper within cabinet abolishing term limits, I cannot confirm that at all. In fact, when we discussed the issue of term limits maybe a month and a half ago or a month ago in January, it was clear within caucus and with former ministers now sitting in caucus that we hadn't approved of any measure of that sort. But I stand to be corrected. Maybe it was done when I was on my honeymoon in October, but I honestly do not recall Minister Minus bringing a cabinet paper like that to cabinet for such a decision.
Go ahead, caller, you're on the air. Good evening.
Good evening. I wanted the minister to talk about the youngsters, the children that were supposed to be coming here to work, be able to work. Just kind of highlight us on that subject, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thankful for the question from that caller, which again just reiterates the concern that many Bermudians, those who voted for the Progressive Labour Party, those who stayed home, and those who voted for the One Bermuda Alliance, those concerns are now reached a crescendo point, you know, and it's a result of again of haste making base, and it brings question marks as to whose interests the One Bermuda Alliance is serving. The reality is this: if you're speaking of jobs, if you're speaking about young people needing employment, why on earth will your first concern within 2 months of being the government be, according to what the statement that came out by Minister Fahey, the welfare of gas workers' children? How could that be your priority? The last time I checked, the only gas workers in this country that have children in this country are gas workers that also are in a position to have their wife or their spouse and have a high net worth or high paying job. You do not see blue-collar gas workers here with their children. You do not see persons from the Caribbean or the Philippines as an example here with their children. So why should we be overly concerned about the general welfare of gas workers' children in this country when you have so much young Bermudians in this country who are seeking opportunities to advance themselves? So
did you see the response from the One Bermuda Alliance today?
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me. And it's a result of, they will say that they are listening public. Well, that's not the way to go about listening. You don't make decisions arbitrarily and then when you get negative feedback, not just from the opposition, not just from the general public, but from your own supporters, you do an about face on it and say, well, it's no longer as important as we wanted it to be. That is a problem. And so the One Bermuda Alliance has to realize, right, that yes, they are the government, but they need to take time, right, and really map out the decisions that they make. Measure twice and cut once. And so that's a big concern for Bermudians. And yes, they will say, oh, well, we're not going to pursue it now. And I have to credit my shadow minister, Walter Rabban, and Senator Marc Daniels for highlighting that issue, because you will note that it was presented to the public the same night as the term limits conversation held at St. Paul's. I don't know if the intention was to put it in the public domain, understanding that the conversation was going to be on that term limit conference at St. Paul's, so that the public will overlook it or forget. But when you speak of allowing young persons who are the children of gas workers having the opportunity to work in this country, that is strictly anti-Bermudian, anti-white Bermudian, anti-black Bermudian, anti-PLP voter, and anti-OBA voter. And so as an opposition, we felt it incumbent upon ourselves to highlight that, that decision or that proposal as an indication that the One Bermuda Alliance do not have the proper coordinates. And it is a major concern for the people of this country.
Go ahead, caller. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Gary, and to Mr. Bean.
Good evening, sir.
Referring to the article in the Royal Gazette this morning, is it correct that you denounce those who insist that there's a generational rift within the party, and and you also refer to as the One Bermuda Alliance government as a institution built upon lies and deceit. I think that does more to discredit your character than it does that of the One Bermuda Alliance, because you agreed in the throne speech to work with the government, and this is not a good start with remarks like that, Mr. Bean. I have really respected you more than that. Really, I never thought I would hear those words coming from you.
Okay, it's not the first time.
I'm not trying to be
No, I understand.
critical, but constructive comment I'm making.
Well, I've noticed, sir, and I've listened and I've heard your voice in the public domain for a few months, and I know that is constructive criticism, and I accept it as such, because you are a person that speaks your mind and you call it as you see it. And so I accept the fact that you speak from a position of honor and integrity. Now, it's not the first time that I have made statements describing people's behavior in such graphic terms. But I don't think one should focus on the statement that describes the behavior. We should focus on the behavior itself. Now, in terms of a generation gap, yes, I denounce any person who tries to purport that there is a generation gap within the Progressive Labor Party. Wasn't that the excuse for the BDA to break away from the United Bermuda Party? That the young bucks were having issues and that there was a generation gap? And so then they went about this long roundabout way of becoming one again? Well, we do not do that in the Progressive Labor Party. We are honest. With all the warts and morals that we have, we do not have to act like a political alchemist, right, in order to fool the people. And so, yes, as the leader of the party, I made it clear that we, in speaking on behalf of the general membership who voted through the delegates, voted me to be the leader, I made it clear that we will have no place for people who want to use age as an instrument of divide and rule. There's no place for it. And if people do not like it, then so be it.
Go ahead, caller. Good evening. You're on the air.
Evening.
Yes, good evening.
I just want to say to Mr. Dean, first of all, I just want to say that
I guess we lost that one.
Okay.
I want to come back to another issue that we were discussing in the newsroom today, and it has to do with, I don't want to call him a Johnny-come-lately, but he's still, for all intents and purposes, still a newcomer to the Progressive Labor Party, Mr. Wayne Furbert, who was given a shadow cabinet position ahead of Mr., and correct me if I'm wrong, ahead of Mr. Terry Lister. Why so?
Well, you're wrong, if you want to be corrected, right?
Well, hey.
No, but again, for the edification of the public, at the delegates conference on December 21st, there was a leadership contest between myself and MP Lister. We were sitting beside one another when the votes were being counted. 147 votes were cast, which means that the majority, the clear majority, is 75 votes.
Yes.
Once I had reached 75 votes, the voting hadn't been completed. I reached over to MP Lister, as he indicated in his statement, and I invited him immediately to join me as the Shadow Minister of Finance in my shadow cabinet. And he gave a little shrug of shoulders and said, I guess he would think about it. But you have to understand the time and the place we were in. I had just defeated him in the leadership, so of course I would not expect an immediate response. But at the same time, I have an administrative responsibility according to the Constitution to ensure that I have a Senate appointments done and my shadow cabinet is been appointed. In fact, I was able to appoint my shadow cabinet by the Thursday, I believe, and the One Bermuda Alliance hadn't appointed their full legislative body at that point. And so I don't know why they had a delay, but I know my responsibility was to ensure that the team is in place. The first invite, before anyone else received the invite, was to MP Lister. So on the Thursday, I went up to Government House to be sworn in as the opposition leader. Upon leaving or exiting Government House, going to my car, I received an email from MP Lister, and where he indicated that, you know, he turns down my invitation for him to join the shadow cabinet as the shadow finance minister, and that he will continue to work on behalf of the party. And that was that.
All right. Good evening, caller. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Moreno, and good evening to your in-studio guest, opposition leader, Marc.
Evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. May God bless both of you and your respective families accordingly to his zeal and kind graces.
Thank you.
I'm glad I'm able to call this evening on behalf of our brothers and sisters in our native island of Bermuda, and we would like to thank our brother Marc for being opposition leader at this time, because he's bringing a rejuvenating spirit and a cultural ideology and a spiritual and educational ideology to the Progressive Labor Party, which hitherto may have never been before the forefront. But our people, regardless of race or ethnicity, have always looked upon grassroots, and we have always looked upon that which was down the bottom trying to come up top. We would hope in the ensuing years that the brother Marc teachings and his ideas and his forward progress and vision would be brought to the forefront of Bermudian political, social, educational, and cultural life. And we thank him for his position. We also honor and respect our present government, the One Bermuda Alliance, for winning the previous election, which shows democracy in action. But our internal hope is that the One Bermuda Alliance has in its mandate the teachings and the words which they spoke prior to the previous election, because they have informed the general public that they would suspend term limits for a 2-year period, and right after they was elected, this term limit was abolished without any consultation. At the previous term limits work permit forum held on February 13th, 5:30 p.m. at St. Paul Centennial Hall, it was a white gentleman that stood up at the end of...
Okay, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
It was a white gentleman that spoke at the end of the term limits meeting and said that he voted for them based upon the ideology of term limit suspension. But he came to the realization that they had deceived the people of Bermuda because they had abolished term limits without consultation with the general public. And he thought because it was a nationalistic issue and because it was an issue that permeated throughout the hearts and minds of all our people, regardless of race, that they should have had some concerted effort towards consultation prior to making such a wide-ranging decision that would impact the lives of so many people.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. A huge mouthful there.
Let me just go back real quick to the previous caller who asked about the term I used, demonic. Let me make it clear. Words are used to describe behavior. If you have an issue with the word that's describing the behavior, then seek to change the behavior. As the leader of the Progressive Labor Party, I am not partial in letting people know or giving them the correction required. I apply that within the PLP, and I certainly will apply it to the One Bermuda Alliance. They are the government. We are the opposition. And so if they don't like the idea of me characterizing them or the behavior as being demonic, which I already made it clear that demonic behavior is just that, fraud, deceit, and lies, then change your behavior and change it for the interest of everyone in this country, inclusive of those that you somehow convince to not come out to vote or vote for you. Okay, it's not just about the Progressive Labor Party. I don't have no tolerance.
Those are the OBA convinced not to come out to vote, and you think that people will act perhaps showing their dissatisfaction by not casting their ballot for the OBA, but they're not going to vote for not casting the ballot for the PLP, but they didn't want to vote for the OBA.
Well, it's clearly that the 30% of the voting populace that did not come out to vote were traditional PLP supporters, and I will give the One Bermuda Alliance credit where it's due. They ran an excellent campaign. They didn't produce any substantive policy positions.
Right.
They didn't produce a comprehensive platform. They were very much well-monitored. They had a very good branding campaign with pretty colors and everything else. And they harped on all the negatives that will ensure that people became disenchanted
that is
with
politics,
the government.
Mr. B.
Exactly. Exactly. That's my point. That's my point. And so, yes, they were able to convince or drive, which was part of the strategy. You can see that in the report that everyone spoke about leading up, that we dragged to death, right, leading up to the election. But it was clear that was the strategy. It's politics, like you say. But ultimately, at some point in time, we have to transcend politics and see politics as merely an instrument to uplift people. All right? And so, yes, they went and they did what they can to ensure that people didn't come out to vote. Now, rest assured, I'm confident today that if the One Bermuda Alliance was to call a snap election, we'll be able to get at least 10 to 15% of those persons who were disenchanted with the Progressive Labour Party, but in no way would they ever vote for the One Bermuda Alliance.
Go ahead, caller. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to you all and your guests.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Bean, I really appreciate you. I've spoken to you on the street before. I would just like to say, I think that the conception of how PLP has lost is that you guys have missed the mark. I'll tell you how you guys lost. See, us as Bermudan people, we vote, right? People keep saying it's not a black and white thing, but let's be honest, right? When you hear these people with these blogs and talking the way they talk, you know,
Yep.
the 50 or who I am, who they're talking about.
Absolutely.
Now, let's cut through the chase. Now,
Sure.
first of all, right, I'm not racist. Let me clear that up. I have biracial children,
Yes.
married to a white woman,
Yes.
and she's a foreigner.
Yes.
I'm not against foreigners. All right? Now, that's cleared up. Now, let's get down to the real issues there. We know who they're talking about, and you're right. They did lead a good campaign. But where you guys lost, I'll tell you where you lost me, and you lost a lot of my peers in the 40s and 50s. When you took over Mr. Furbett, okay? Because Mr. Furbett, on numerous occasions in the opposition, who told us that there was no issues of racism, discrimination, or anything. Now, you said about integrity. Integrity is a man's word.
Yes.
How can you allow him to come into the PLP when he has clearly demonstrated that his word ain't even worth the face that is on TV that we're looking at? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Sure.
And I know directly maybe you didn't, but even for that organization to take on any of this, because it looked like you were not only become, you were no longer the PLP, you had also become part of the UBP. Because how many members came over? 5? 6? How many was it, Mr. Bean?
MPs or members in general?
Members, MPs, all together.
It was probably about 6 or 7.
Okay, so what happened was, from my point of view, looking at those faces that were coming on, I said, you guys become one organization. So how can we separate you as two different parties, but clearly you're rubbing face to face with the whole enemy who was against you a few years ago, who told us as a people, let go of all this racism, and when they found out that they were done wrong, right, then they want to cross over to the other side.
Well, brother, it's. I suggest that it's a good chance that you will have similar OBA MPs in the future doing the same thing. Once, because you have to remember, those persons who left the United Bermuda Party and joined the Progressive Labour Party left the United Bermuda Party not because of the Progressive Labour Party. They left the UBP because of the issues within the United Bermuda Party. And so while they were under the spell of the UBP and they preached the color blindness and let's get along, eventually the truth hit them right in the face. And so, for instance, MP Furbett, he didn't just join the Progressive Labour Party. He went and he sat as an independent. And then eventually he realized that his position, through his life experience, he has now decided that he could be more effective in serving the interests of the people in this country by joining the PLP. He did not do it by stealth. He stood up in the House and he left the UBP and he became an independent, and then he publicly got up and he joined the Progressive Labour Party. And to be honest, when Premier Cannoner, when his time is done in the OBA, then the door is open for him too. It's open for MP Richards and all those who purported to be originally Progressive Labour Party supporters, but have now seen, I guess, the grass is green on the other side. But again, that's temporary, and it's something that we know because past experience indicates that. Now, I could also say this, that, for instance, MP Furbett, since he has become a member of the Progressive Labour Party, he has been 100% committed. He has been 100% supportive. And since I've become the leader, has been 100% supportive also. So at times you have to understand that people might be on a path in life until they reach a point where they have to ask themselves, am I on the right path? See, the whole idea of forgiveness in life is not the fact that you made a mistake, but when the option is presented to you again, and you have that option, you choose to do what's right instead of what you like. You learn from your experiences. And I think MP Frederick, as well as others, have learned from their experiences. It would be wise if the Premier, the Honorable Craig Cannon here, learns from the experiences of Ian Frederick and Kim Swan and other leaders of the United Bermuda Party. Learn that lesson, because there's nothing new under the sun. And that's not a warning, that's the truth.
You're saying that his time, in fact, may be limited?
Yes.
And on what do you base that? Based on the past experiences you've seen with Kim Swan and Wayne
Past
Frederick?
experience and current experiences. You have to know that my opposition leader's office is right across the street from the cabinet office. There's no activity at the cabinet office, Gary. And I know what activity is at the cabinet office. All right? What I see is the Premier basically reduced to giving sound bites, controlled interviews, and cutting ribbons. All right? I don't see no big business meetings of people coming to the cabinet office to have meetings with the Premier. It's a ghost town. It means that he is being marginalized and isolated. Right? And I see it. And it's something that I said from the get-go. And it's something that he might be able to come on the radio and say, well, I deny it. But that's fine. Time will tell. Time will tell. There's nothing new under the sun. And so when I'm up in the House of Assembly on Friday, and I see the behavior, you know, the pontificating and the grandstanding, obviously they won the election, so to the victor goes the spoils. And of course you will feel confident and you will say things, and that's all the banter that goes back and forth. But I had to ask myself, do some of you actually believe what you're saying? Knowing full well that the amount of issues that's going on internally within the One Bermuda Alliance.
Enlighten us.
Everything will come out in the future. Unlike the Progressive Labour Party, it's hard for us to hide anything. We are an open book. But you have to remember the One Bermuda Alliance, how it was formed, was top down. It's very few people who really understand what the full intent and strategy is. Okay? And so even when the Premier became the Premier, I mean, look, as an example, and I'll just leave it at this. Myself and Deputy Party Leader Derek Burgess were in the House on Friday during the debate. And MP Burgess reached over to me and says, hey, Cuzzy, that's how he speaks to me.
Hello.
Hold, please, sir.
You're trying to get through.
Yes, hold, please.
Okay.
He says, hey, Cuzzy, who does the post office come under within the overall structure of government? And I said, you know, I don't know. Let's ask, you know, the leadership of the One Bermuda Alliance. So the Premier wasn't in his seat. So I called out to Minister Michael Dunkley and said, hey, Dunk, who does the post office come under? You know what Minister Dunkley did? He turned straight to Minister Grant Gibbons. He said, Grant, who does the post office come under? And we got our answer. Oh, comes under finance. Do you know what that tells us? What do you think it tells us? If the leader or deputy leader have to ask another MP about the structure of their government, it tells me that the person that they're asking is the person who structured their government. So who's really in control? You can get up and give sound bites in Parliament and sound good and sound like a preacher on a pulpit all you like. What I do know is, no matter how much difficulty and challenges we're having in the Progressive Labour Party, the leadership is clear.
Them thou's fighting words, Mr. Bean.
It's not fighting words, it's the truth.
Go ahead, caller. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening. How you doing, Gary?
I'm all right, sir.
And good evening, Mr. Bean.
Good evening, sir.
It's a pleasure to hear you speaking. You know, there's a lot of things that's being spoke about, and I don't think that a lot of people, you know, a lot of young people, like you said, that's been voting and all that in the last election. But if we really look at what's been going on, the 40 Thieves are back in charge. The OBA, One Bermuda Alliance, that was the Always Association. And it seems very clear to me, I don't know if it is to the breasted people in the island, that genocide is being committed on the island once again.
Well, there's one little difference, one little nuance to that. In the old days, with the 40 Thieves. The 40 Thieves ensured that their interests as Bermudians, or white Bermudians, or the oligarchs of Bermuda, their interests were secure. Today, it's a new dimension where IB, international business, no matter how beneficial, and I'm grateful for their presence, but it seems like the One Bermuda Alliance is not necessarily focusing on the oligarchical feminists. They're more so focused on appeasing international business. Now, that can be a challenge, and that's why we speak of taking a balanced approach to ensuring that there's a mutually beneficial relationship when it comes to our economic and social progress in this country. And I feel that the One Bermuda Alliance are overly focused on serving or proving to one small segment of the population, and not necessarily voters, that their interest is secure at the expense of everyone else.
I want to take you back to something you said previously about no meetings taking place, no activity taking place at the Cabinet Office. Our very own Terai Trott interviewed Premier Cannonell last week at some point, and the Premier made it clear that there were a number of discussions going on, a number of meetings taking place with individuals, particularly in international business.
Not the big discussions. I can tell you that much.
You're not in the Cabinet Office,
sure.
Mr. B?
I sit across the street, you know, right? I sit across the street. I know who goes into the Cabinet Office. Okay, the big boys, they're going directly to the big boys in his cabinet, and that's the truth. All right, and that's what it is. That's what it is.
Go ahead, Cole, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I have a question. I'm actually 30 years old, and I've been watching this show for the past hour. And the question that I have is, we always seem to get in these conversations about politics. And I'm sitting up here as a 30-year-old listening and wondering, what do you plan to do? What is the community plan to do? What is all of the leaders plan to do for this country? And all we constantly hear is the argument about who did what, how they did, how they plan to do it, how this was experienced and that was experienced. I'm feeling it's been an hour. So now the question is, looking forward, how do you as a minister, opposition leader, now bring forth knowledge to the communities? Because remember, we are the ones that put the party in power, and we're the ones that can make change in the country. Why haven't we spent this hour on educating the youth and the young people coming up as to what should we be standing for, what can make our country better? Instead, we sat here and we listen to arguments.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, and I appreciate...
We have 50 seconds.
I appreciate the statement that the lady makes. I don't think she listened to the entire program because we touched on education in the first place. Now, I know that for the young people, they might not like hearing this type of discourse, but the questions that she had is a result of the discourse that we just had. Those are the issues that will lead to one asking the question as to what is really our focus. Now, not only did we give a solution for education, which we feel is absolutely essential going forward, but we also spoke on crime.
You're going to have to wrap. Thank you very much, Mr. Bean, for being here. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for viewing. God bless and have a good night.
Welcome to Let's